we make a big song and dance in this industry about how the entire technology is self-regulating. What do you do? Well, what are your options? I think your options are either you go the route of everybody else and you say, okay, well, bring in the regulators, call the SEC, crank down on whoever we don't like, et cetera, et cetera. Or you go down the route of, okay, we're going to self-police ourselves.
And today is a special day because I have a very distinct pleasure of welcoming Emin Gün Sirer, CEO of Ava Labs and professor at Cornell University. How's it going?
Very well. Thank you for having me.
So what is, by the way, Ava Labs? That's something I hadn't heard in your title lately, and it piqued my curiosity.
Ava Labs is my latest startup, and it's a company that's seeking to build the latest, greatest coin around the biggest breakthrough in distributed systems in the last 10 years. So just to give everybody a very quick overview of what has happened in the space of coins, the entire coin idea is predicated on consensus protocols. And the consensus protocol area has been in existence for about 45 years. In that time, we spent 35 years on old school, what we call classical consensus protocols. These are the kinds of protocols that are used in Corda, in Quorum, and others, PBFT, Cosmos. These are classical protocols. They're being resurrected now in proof-of-stake systems. But they're very fragile. So when Satoshi came by, he looked at the whole set of these things and said, look, none of these things are, pass muster. They're very, very fragile. It's hard to build robust, big, open systems with them. I'm going to invent something new. And he invented proof of work. And so that kept us going for about 10 years. And proof of work is very, very easy to understand. I think it has some nice properties, but it also has some terrible properties. It doesn't scale. It consumes enormous amounts of energy. And it has long latencies. It requires dedicated miners. It has a split bifurcated community of miners versus users. I can go on and on. And so what Avalanche does is the latest paper, recent paper that was dropped last May. It's a new consensus protocol. It works entirely differently from systems that people have seen, the kinds of things you see in Ethereum 2.0 and so forth. And it works entirely differently from Nakamoto-style consensus, from proof of work. It combines the best of both. It's robust like Nakamoto, and it's super high throughput like some of the classical systems. It's, in short, it's simply the fastest, quickest, most green protocol out there. And we're building a revolutionary new coin on top with a lot of exciting features that I'm not at liberty to disclose at the moment. So I've been in stealth mode for a few months now. We've received some funding from some of the biggest names in Silicon Valley, and we've been building product for a couple of months, and we can't wait to go testnet soon.
Yeah, that sounds very exciting and interesting, especially something that's been on a lot of our minds lately is, in fact, consensus, because the subject of today is Bitcoin, but not what split off from Bitcoin, but what split off from what split off of Bitcoin, which is clearly a little bit of a consensus issue right there. But that's a long-winded subject for another day. Bitcoin SV, of course, is most commonly associated with this certain guy, which I'm sure is a very cuddly fellow, all our buddy, Mr. Craig Wright. And because of some stuff that this person has been involved with lately, in more or less direct reaction to that, Bitcoin SV has been delisted from a variety of different cryptocurrency exchanges, and that has severely impacted the price in the short term. It's so, as I understand, you seem to be, I guess, a fan of this turn of events where Bitcoin SV has been removed from listings because of the actions of Craig Wright. Would you think that's an accurate assessment?
I wouldn't say I'm a fan, but
or you're okay with?
I'm more than okay with it. So somewhere in between. So here's my position. So we make a big song and dance in this industry about how the entire technology is self-regulating. It's self-assuring, right? So the number of Bitcoin outstanding, BTC outstanding, will always be 21M, right? That is something that will never change. And it's there by decree. It's built into the protocol. That's wonderful. And this kind of assurance that comes from tech is fantastic. And that's what's allowed us to keep regulators somewhat at bay in certain aspects where the technology could provide us some guarantee. But there is a bigger ecosystem out there. And in that ecosystem, there exist all sorts of people, scammers of different kinds we've seen, frauds of different kind we've seen. You name it, we've seen it. Like there's the Quadriga event. There's all sorts of exit scams. We've seen a whole lot of bad actors taking advantage of relatively naive, relatively trusting investors. So what do you do? Or what are your options? I think your options are either you go the route of everybody else and you say, okay, well, bring in the regulators, call the SEC, crank down on whoever we don't like, etc., etc. Or you go down the route of, okay, we're going to self-police ourselves. We're going to build an amazing future based on technology that is inherently trustworthy, technology that's better than what the Wall Street guys have got. So that's the dream to live towards. And as we go along that path, we don't want the incumbents protected by the state. We don't want regulators coming in with a strong hand. We saw what happened when they came in New York State with BitLicense, and it set New York back, essentially by at least 5 years, maybe 10. So that kind of thing is not something I want to see. And so the only alternative we're left with, and the only sensible alternative on the table is, well, then the bad actors, we have to clean up ourselves. And what we saw with the BSV delisting was the exchanges reacting to somebody who's bringing the entire space down. And when you're doing that, you pose a systemic risk. If you're going to be running roughshod, doing all sorts of things, and duping people in essence, then somebody has to say stop. Or at least they get to say, they can't say stop to you, but they can say, I'm going to stop supporting your ongoing whatever it is that I don't like.
Yeah, that sounds very perfectly reasonable. Now, here I come with like the basket of devil's advocate type questions, which of course should not be interpreted as personal views. They're just trying to advance the conversation. So don't get angry if you say, oh, you think that this sort of thing is okay. I'm never speaking to you again.
No. Of course. I'm perfectly happy with what we call Gedanken experiments, a thought experiment. Let's do many of them. Yes. And there are lots of exciting ones in this space.
Now, this exciting thought experiment, of course, is it seems pretty obvious someone is a bad actor, a net drain on the space, and not just, he's not good, but like actively harmful is kind of a thing. But that's the idea, and the idea is to either punish him or otherwise retaliate or otherwise cut off defensively. Punish.
Cut him off, deplatform. Yeah.
Yes, deplatform a person who has been doing this kind of stuff. Now, there isn't something that's known as CSC, ticker CSC, or CWC, Craig Wright coin. There isn't such a thing. There is a thing called Bitcoin SV. Now, Bitcoin SV is a near carbon copy of Bitcoin BTC or Bitcoin Cash BCH. It's
Bitcoin Cash. It's a near carbon copy of Bitcoin Cash. Yes. And I was involved in that fork, by the way, and I watched it happen. And the BSV crew is so incompetent that they needed help from the BCH programmers to successfully fork off and keep their fork separate and alive. So it's indeed essentially a carbon copy of BCH plus patches contributed by the BCH guys. It's amazing how little effort went into that fork.
Well, I mean, if only we were so lucky that no copy and paste coins were even in the top 10 these days. But hey, it happens. Now, as far as by being a virtue of and Bitcoin Cash is essentially to some major degree a copy of BTC with, of course, a few very important changes. And so all in all, it's all Bitcoin. And one of the things about Bitcoin, it is ostensibly decentralized, as in anyone can run a miner. I mean, not everyone can do it profitably, but anyone can run mining code anywhere in the world. Anyone can gather, anyone can ostensibly run a node. It all works on its own, and the supply gets distributed across the whole world. And the supply itself does not have anything to do with the governance of the coin. Anyone can kind of use it. No one can stop you from using it, pretty much. And also the supply of Bitcoin SV was distributed via the hard forks because to current holders of Bitcoin Cash, which largely were current holders of BTC, of original Bitcoin or whatever. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a very politically charged term for some. I don't mean it that way, but it's Bitcoin SV is based on the same decentralized infrastructure as or essentially as two other widely accepted as decentralized projects. And Bitcoin SV also has it's not just all Craig Wright and Calvin Ayre holding on to all the coins themselves, or at least not by design, right? It's not supposedly that. It's tons of people across the world have these. So how does attacking a decentralized project, how does cutting off a completely decentralized project, again, by structure, not necessarily by reality, how does that tie into the one person who this has been considered as a bad actor?
I don't think it's a one person is being considered a bad actor kind of situation. I don't think this has much to do with Craig, and Craig is immaterial in this.
Mm.
What I think is going on is the forces behind that coin, the economic majority behind that coin, is acting in bad faith. It's that's what I think got people upset. And I'm making this as a non-normative statement. What are they doing? They're sending a bunch of lawsuits. They're sending some, scare letters in effect. Actually, I don't know if they're starting the lawsuits. I think they're just sending letters through their lawyer. And so that's the kind of thing you can do to try to scare people. And it is what it is. But people took a dislike to that. And this was not perceived to be coming from Craig per se. I believe it was coming from the what I would call the centralized commandeering force behind BSV. And make no mistake, BSV is a centralized coin. There are 3 miners that are in bed with each other that belong ultimately to the same set of people. So those miners are very, very closely coupled. And any sort of decentralization that you might perceive as decentralization theater. It's just like going around like this to scratch your ear. At the end of the day, you're making scratch marks on a blockchain with the aid of some hashing, whatever, some mining rigs, some hash power. And these guys are doing that. And it seems like 80% or more of the hash power belongs to the same set of actors that are very, very closely coupled, if not acting towards the same coherent goal. So it's a centralized effort. That's the people in charge of that centralized effort, it seems, started acting in a way that ended up upsetting lots and lots of people. And as a result, you saw a very organic, very broad-based reaction from the entire community. So this is a very fractured space, as everybody knows. It's very tribal, and there are people watching this who love me, and then there are people who are watching this to look for, whatever, things to take out of context, or people who love other people and people who are complete haters in this space. But there is one point on which everybody is unified, that Dash and Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin and, you name it, Ethereum, everybody can agree that Craig Wright's entry into this space has not been a good positive force for the overall space. I think an ongoing situation like that unfolds, claims that are unsubstantiated, serious claims, big claims that are unsubstantiated, designed to draw money in, designed to have naive people separated from their cash. Overt, well-documented cases of academic plagiarism. These kinds of things, they're never good. And so at some point, people said enough is enough. And who's going to blame them? They did exactly the right thing. At some point, you just got to say, look, this space, we want it to go to 1T, 1 trillion. We reached 700B with some really limited technology, right? At the time we were 700B, Bitcoin, BTC, was doing 3 transactions per second. At around the same time, I think Ethereum was doing like 7 TPS. So, with that kind of crappy technology, with that kind of unscalable, limited technology, we managed to reach 700B. And now we're back down to 100B as of the time of this discussion. And we wanted to go to 1T. Well, you can't go to 1T. Your balloon can't rise, if you will. If you've got this anchor that's dragging you down with the frauds, with the lawsuits, with the crazy claims, with all sorts of fancy things that these people do to manipulate social media. And it's just not. This is not a good, healthy space. This is not what you want to be doing. It's not what you want to be part of. And if an exchange says, "Hey, I'm pulling the eject button here," they're doing the right thing.
So I guess the argument on that would be if this was just a few isolated people's isolated opinions, then it wouldn't be such a wellspring, such a movement to delist or ostracize. And the fact that it is kind of that means it's not just one figurehead, it's a lot of people working together doing bad things that the whole community can mostly agree on, with a few exceptions, that these guys are no good. Is that kind of the thought?
That's right. That's right. I think the widespread opinion, at least as far as I can tell from my circles, is that there is nothing good that comes out of this entire effort. It's a parody of a scalability approach. It's a parody of various sayings of old sayings from Satoshi. It's a parody of somebody who's a nincompoop going into this space, trying to sort of make something happen without understanding, turning knobs, not understanding what's going on. It's like Curious George at the blockchain factory. We got a monkey in the control seat, and he's turning things, making noise, and at the end of the day, it's not accomplishing anything good. And people who are involved in this are rightfully saying, "Hey, we don't want to be part of this." Who can blame them?
Yes. Now that seems to be one side of things, where it just, all right, is this a good system? Are these good people, etc.? And then, is there justified action against them? And then now we go to the way action was delivered. Now, of course, it could be like a broad-based, people decide to sell their Bitcoin SV or whatever. People decide to publicly condemn. People file counter lawsuits, etc. However it ends up working out. But specifically, this has been regarding exchanges, notably a few exchanges in particular deciding to delist assets based not on asset criteria, but based on external criteria. And now that's the thing that's been interesting to me, because I've noticed that there's always any exchange, of course, in the world has their own criteria for listing or not listing an asset. And they also, even if they have political reasons for delisting an asset, there's always that out of just saying, well, trading while wasn't there, or I don't know, the technical specifications too vulnerable to a 51% attack, which, let's be honest, 90% of the coins out there could easily fall under that, depending on how high you want to put the threshold. You could always make something up of, well, it's just not this, or we see very little real economic activity on the chain. It just seems to be this. But it's none of that. It seems to be, we don't like Craig Wright, therefore this coin that he is involved in, but many other people are involved in, must be delisted. Or the even stranger Twitter poll, which is, I'm sure you know very well about how sock puppetry is so easy out there. And it just putting up when we're talking about trying to get the space into a better, more professional way so we can get to 1 trillion and beyond, do exchanges delisting coins championed by people they don't like based on Twitter polls, is that a good look for the community, or is it kind of the same? Is it kind of the same thing as they're trying to avoid by doing that?
No, I hear you, and there is a good argument there, which is, can we leave these kinds of decisions to the whims of the crowd? So is this some kind of a slippery slope? Today it's Craig, and tomorrow it's Bitcoin Cash, maybe, and we're seeing signs of that. When does a coin become illegitimate, if you will? When do we decide to go after a certain coin or another? And so these are good questions, and I'm perfectly comfortable as somebody who is not a robot, as somebody who has what I consider to be a fairly well-fed, fairly well kept neural network right here behind my eyes, I'm fairly comfortable looking at situations and using this thing called human judgment. And I was comfortable with this when the DAO hack came by in the case of the Ethereum's fork. And I knew then that you could do the DAO hack once and not do it again. It's possible. The conditions were right for the DAO hack. I'll bet anything that they're unlikely that they're not going to do a similar hack under similar situations. And again, in here, perfectly comfortable with BSV getting picked on because of a consistent pattern of negative impact. And I'm fairly comfortable that exchanges will not do this to other coins. Now, have we seen exchanges misbehave? Of course we have. They're centralized and they're at the whims of their controllers. And that's exactly what we want to take down. So let's not make any mistake. My gold standard here is a decentralized exchange. I love those. I think the world needs better of those. The existing ones are not very good. They're all open to manipulation, and people are manipulating them left and right. I know this firsthand because we have research projects that we're looking into front-running decentralized exchanges. So the decentralized exchanges are just not ready yet. And so the centralized ones we've got, they can be cantankerous. And we've seen like funny games played. We've seen bad ticker symbols attached. We've seen funny fights over ticker symbols, especially. We've seen certain coins that should have been listed quickly take forever to get listed on certain exchanges. I can go on and on. Some are very conservative. Gemini has only a couple of trading pairs, and others are much more welcoming, like Binance. So there's a range there, and we're already okay with it. These people use their judgment. Sometimes I object. Sometimes, most often I'm okay with what they do. And in this particular case, I don't think this is a precedent. I don't think this is a sign of pogroms to come or torch wielding crowds together or pitchfork wielding crowds together and attack each other. Or even if they do, they do it on a daily basis on Twitter. Even if they do, I don't think they're going to get anywhere. I don't think Binance will delist, whatever Bitcoin Cash tomorrow. So I don't know what to say really, except to say, yeah, I think you got to have faith. I think we all are very smart. I think everybody has one of these state-of-the-art neural networks. And I know I keep mine as consistent and principled as I can. And I know that, there's other people do the same. Modulo the one thing, which is sometimes when they have some money at stake, people end up throwing out. So some people end up throwing out their principles. But on the whole, I have faith in the community. And I don't think we're going to see these pogroms, these attacks on other coins. I think this is a special treatment for a very well-deserving actor. These guys worked so hard, so very hard to get to where they are. This is what they had this coming.
Now, as far as separating from, I guess, a movement/mob mentality, what about the accusations of exchanges acting as a cartel? Because this is the exchange space is a partially regulated space, as in there are barriers to entry. Not everyone can just go and start their own exchange.
Right. And
at the same time, there aren't other bits of regulatory oversight, which again, this is all stuff that I don't particularly care for at all, right? I'd rather have a self-policing community rather than any kind of government invention whatsoever. Mm-hmm. However, we're in this place where the several large exchanges have gotten that way and don't really have that much competitive threat for someone trying to go, say, because I've heard some people in the BSV community, for example, saying, oh, we're just going to start our own exchanges with hookers and blow. Not really, but and then start doing that. But ultimately
if they start an exchange, let's be clear, if they start an exchange, it's going to have child porn on it because their chain already has child porn on it. And if they have hookers and blow, from what I've seen from Calvin Ayer's timeline on Twitter, those dancer girls, that was not a good sight. So I don't want to see people of that kind. I don't want to see people of that caliber. I don't want to associate with them. We do research here. We do world-class research. And I have single-handedly brought hundreds of people into cryptocurrency. I've briefed thousands of people, including politicos. And as I'm doing that for the entire industry, when I'm in DC talking to lawmakers, when I'm in Albany talking to New York State lawmakers, I want to know that I stand for something that will make the US competitive in the coming age of finance. That's the main thing that I need to be able to sell. And this industry, this area, this community has been notoriously bad, notoriously tribal. I know that as I'm doing that, there's some Bitcoin maximalist who's like trying to make noise, trying to undermine essentially somebody who has worked really hard to bring value to BTC as well as other currencies. So that's happening. But it's very crucial to me and other people who work in this space that we stand for good. And if I'm in front of an audience like that, and there's like pictures of the Cuban twerking team or whatever, and that's just not something that goes together. And I cannot tell you just how much this upsets me. It upsets me at a visceral level. Seeing those girls, I don't know how old they are. I don't think anybody knows how old they are. So seeing that got me upset off scale. Like, on a scale of 0 to 10, we're talking numbers that are uncountably many. So not cool, not okay. If you think that's okay, if you think that's bad boy behavior, well, exactly. The only thing I can tell you is really 2 letters at that point. And those 2 letters were all essentially uttered by the entire exchange community. CZ just told BSV to go and do something to themselves. And that's what they deserve. So now the other point that you bring up is interesting, which is cartel-like behavior.
Yes.
We have two fewer exchange.
Kind of fill that out a little more.
Sure.
So it seems like Binance kicked this off.
Yeah.
It seems like Binance, which is one of the heavyweights in the room, if not one of the largest exchanges, it's just saying we're going to first off saying if you don't cut out these lawsuits, I will delist you with my exchange. And then that happened, and then very shortly thereafter, Kraken put out a poll and then ended up following through. And then Shapeshift acted. Yeah. And I believe Gemini said something along the lines of, we never listed
We never listed this crap in the first place.
Yes. So, which I don't know if that's a dig at their compatriots or if it's just an attempted solidarity with them. But it seems like a few large players and large exchanges, very rooted exchanges, kick this thing off. And so that's what I'm talking about when I'm asking the question of, is this cartel-like behavior that now that they've sort of used the One Ring's power once, they're like, ooh, this was fun. But just a few of us who just have coffee together, we managed to just wreck an entire project. What if something else comes along and we just say, you know what? We will personally sell all our, say, Bitcoin Cash holdings, and then just say, you know what? And then we're gonna play some trickery, but now we're all gonna make up some nonsense and just say Roger Ver, because he's a felon and all this kind of stuff and bad man or something. I don't make something up about him, and then just say this is unacceptable. We're all delisting BCH. Put some Twitter polls, throw some of their Twitter bots at it, and then there you go. Then they wipe that out, and then they'll clink their champagne glasses, and then they blink their lizard eyes sideways or whatever kind of silly kind of facade you want to put on this sort of thing. But basically, is it at all concerning that a small group of exchanges, powerful exchanges, seem to have sort of acted together before there was enough of a popular uprising that could have been kind of quantified?
Yeah, that's a concern, and that's always a concern. And but we already have laws against that. So you can't have Microsoft and Sun and Apple collude to fix salaries in Silicon Valley. They did. And the Department of Justice went after them, and they got some major fines. You can't have, all kinds of other cases that we've seen where essentially a small industry group got together, and they sometimes get together and talk. Sometimes they signal to each other using covert means. On Wall Street, we saw market makers signal to each other by using the last digit of a price. So they would indicate. Using the 100th of a cent field, they would indicate to other market makers how they were going to set their side, and so they would collude in essence by communicating over the targets over the market using a very small channel, if you will. So we've seen stuff like this happen. It got found out. in all these cases, because that's how we know about them. And they got punished. This is wrong. It's morally wrong. It's illegal. And if discovered, people will face serious consequences. And well, how do I feel about this? I don't think there was collusion in this case. I don't think CZ picked up the phone and spoke to, I saw CZ just, I don't know, 10 days ago. I didn't actually ask about this, but it just seems like uncharacteristic of him. If you know CZ at all, he's the kind of guy who would unilaterally write exactly what he wrote and who would unilaterally delist BSV. I think that's exactly what he did. And same for all the other exchanges. I don't think there was collusion or cartel formation here. Going forward, am I worried about cartel formation? No, I don't think that that's the best way for the exchanges to make money. I don't think that that's where the profits lie, if you will. In maybe, on NASDAQ market makers, etc., that's a different world. It's a very mature world where like 1% means huge gains and so forth. In the crypto space, there's so much money to be had by just being an upstanding, proper exchange that I don't think they will have to resort to that. That's sort of my go-to fallback position. And also, having met with them and having talked to these people, they're just not that kind of people. If they were to do that in this nascent stage of the tech, they would kill the space. And so I think they understand where their bread is buttered. I think they understand that we all need to get to 1T. And you don't get to 1T by eking out, whatever, 1 mil here, 2 mil there, or by killing off a $50 million or whatever, like $100 million coin here and there. It's just that's not where the action is going to be. You get to 1T by drawing new people in, by creating this aura of respectability, by creating this aura of a trustworthy technology. The technology is capable of doing this, of helping us do this. It's amazing. It's different from everything else. So that's what I would suspect they would want to use, and not these sort of illicit methods. This was really exceptional. And as I said, these guys worked really hard to get to where they are. Craig Wright has targeted me personally for a long time. My paper was the background of his webpage for a long time. He has sicked his press arm to write all sorts of derogatory news articles about me. I mean, these guys are like, whatever. They are doing their thing. It's a grift. And at some point, people said, we don't like your grift. Take it somewhere else.
Now, when you're talking about regulated ecosystem where you have legal restrictions behind a lot of this sort of shady behavior, first off, when you're talking, what some of the biggest criticisms against these individuals have been their legal action against people, not just saying mean things, not just doing mining shenanigans, oh, that's certainly not good, but actually suing people for defamation or things like that. Now, playing devil's advocate or rights advocate, whichever those terms might be interchangeable, if there is legal standing behind these lawsuits, then it turns out that he is on the right side of history. And if he's not on the right side of history, then these lawsuits will be thrown out and he could possibly be countersued. And then the legal process is enough to deal with this whole situation. You don't need to delist his coin. You just literally countersue, or you either don't worry about these bad actions, or you countersue and punish him through the courts rather than the entire ecosystem of his coin through devaluing the coin. What do you think about that argument?
So here's what I think. So there are two parts to this. First of all, regulators and law enforcement and legal action, these things are kind of like the Sandman. So if you turn off the lights and you look in the mirror and you say their name like 6 times or 7 times or whatever, then they appear right behind you. And so, do we want that? Is that the kind of world we want to live in? Do you want like the guy who wrote BitLicense to descend upon the space? There's a counterpart to that guy. Where that guy came from, there are 500 other guys like it. They're going to come up with some crappy regulation, and they will then sell you the solution to the regulation that they themselves enacted. That's exactly what Van Lawsky is doing today. So those guys are on the sidelines. The law enforcement guys are already, they have smelled blood with the various different markets, darknet markets that they've seen. There's already the perception in media that these currencies are used for bad activities and so forth. And now you have this new player creating all this legal action, and what you're seeing is people are looking at this, and sort of the people's jury has already formed their opinion, and they realize that this is a giant waste of effort. And as soon as they see this, they're like, look, we've got some productive people who are getting sued, and with what appears to these people to be frivolous lawsuits. We are seeing the entire space waste energy on non-productive ends. And there is a bigger fight. So we have a narcissist who wants attention at any cost. And we have a real fight out there. The real fight is reimagining the finance world. That's where we need to focus. Binance is not going to go anywhere trading shitcoins all day. Okay, Binance goes somewhere if we have a couple of coins that really correspond to something good and tangible in the real world that people want to own for a good reason. Not hodl, that's not a good reason. Not because of FOMO, but because, yeah, I want to hold this token because it corresponds to something I want to have. So that's the universe we need to go in. And in the meantime, we've got this guy filing frivolous patents, sending all these legal action letters. And so, of course, I think this is all justifiable, and it negates everything else you said. So could you let the law enforcement run its course and then see what happens? No. Why the hell would anybody allow some random jurisdiction in the UK? Well, why would I respect what they have to say? As I said, I already have a state-of-the-art neural network that can classify bullshit and non-bullshit. And my bullshit detector is saying these lawsuits are bullshit. Huddle not, what the hell? Like, that's just some random guy on the internet. The various other people I know, some of them are being quiet, by the way. They've been targeted, but they're not saying anything. What's going on here? Like, what purpose does this serve? At some point, all of us, usually in our teenage years, we all experimented with attention getting, right? We all experimented with good attention, bad attention. We all had tried, I don't know, everybody tries this in their own way. Mine was very small. I was a geeky guy. But we all tried acting out, right? And at some point you realize that the only way to really leave a mark, to really get what you want in life, is to do something good for other people, to give them what they need and want. And if you're not doing that, people will push back. And when they do, by God, you can't complain. So that lesson has been lost on a set of people. And they're too lost. Their value system is so screwed up that they think that posting the Cuban, twerking team or whatever is okay. Those kinds of people, they're not the kind of people I want to associate with. They're not the kind of people I want to do anything with. And good riddance.
Oh, that sounds like a very good two-word conclusion to this conversation. Thanks so much for sharing your time. Where can people find more about you if they want to follow what you do?
They can come to hackingdistributed.com, which is my blog where I talk about crypto and so on, or they can come to my Twitter feed. That's a bit more complicated. It's Elite Haxor, spelled EL33TH4XOR, Elite Haxor, EL33TH4XOR. And as you mentioned, I'm doing this new coin called Ava, and it's going to be fantastic. Just the consensus protocol is groundbreaking, of the kind that comes up every 15 years. We've only had 3 episodes of these kinds of breakthroughs in 45 years of history. The last one was the Satoshi white paper, and the latest one is the Avalanche paper from Team Rocket. And we're building a coin on top, and it's revolutionary, not just at the consensus layer, but on every layer on up. And we're building really exciting solutions on top of it. So I can't wait to roll it out. And anybody interested is welcome to follow me. We also have Telegram channels and so forth, like Avalanche_official is one. Come by, we'll chat, and I'm happy to interact with anybody who's excited about the technology.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks again. Hope you have a good one.
Thank you, Joel.